So let's get on then to our topic for today, AI accelerated development, how to build quality throughout software requirements, development and testing. I'm really excited about to introduce our two expert speakers today who are going to talk to you all about how you can use AI to embed both speed and quality throughout your development lifecycle. So we've got Rich Jordan. Rich is currently an enterprise solutions architect at Curiosity. Before we were lucky enough for him to join us here, he gained about 20 years experience in the financial services industry. He's led large-scale DevOps and testing transformations and won several awards along the way. So Rich really does know what it means to lead meaningful changes at enterprise scale and sort of navigate all of those potential blockers to delivering value in a quality context. We've also then got George Blundell, who's going to be giving you some live demos today to show you all sorts of new applications of AI to quality engineering. So George is a pre-sales and services engineer here at Curiosity. He works with large enterprises across all sorts of industries, really, on test automation, requirements engineering, and test design projects. So George really works sort of at the pointy end of implementations, and you're going to have all of that experience today for live demos and the Q&A. That's probably plenty from me. So if I can hand over to you, Rich, to get us going today.
Dom, thanks for the introduction and welcome everybody to the webinar today. Hopefully you'll find it useful. So just a little run through about what we're going to talk about today. So I'm going to start by just looking at some of the problems that fundamentally testers will have in carrying out their day-to-day jobs today. Then we'll take a little look at the poll, have a conversation about where organizations are in terms of their AI journey. And just to flag up there's a little question there about the ability for individuals to get information or up-to-date information about their systems and things like that at the bottom. After we've gone through that, we'll start to talk about or set the focus towards kind of how we start to use AI and use cases for AI. We'll explore some of the challenges of AI, some of the challenges of LLMs within your own organization, how to give context of your organization and your systems to those LLMs. And then we're going to explore some of the solutions we've started to implement and also evolve in terms of overcoming some of those challenges. And then we'll follow up with a bit of a demo from George that starts to bring some of those solutions to life in terms of how to use LLMs effectively in terms of test design, optimizing testing, and really understanding your system better with AI as an aid to what you're trying to do. So I will just share my screen very quickly with you. So Curiosity Software, one of our main tools is Modeler. And so we're talking about model-based testing here. Really, we focus on a lot around test design, test data, but for the main part, we'll talk about test design here. When you normally talk about, or when you normally listen to a lot of industry presentations, webinars, a little conversation, a lot of it talks around testing and straight to test execution. All right. But actually, as testers, we spend a hell of a lot of our time not doing test execution. All right. We do other things around test execution. And really, this gets into the kind of assisted automation in testing, for example, or AI assisted within testing. We're really talking about some of the fundamental things that we need to do in order to have a rounded approach to our testing. Okay, so we've run a poll. You can see the result of these polls here. Actually, we spend most of our time as testers trying to understand the systems that we're working on, trying to understand the requirements, trying to understand the stakeholders' wants, desires of what the system is supposed to do, and trying to understand how the system is changing. All right, I'm sure lots of people that are listening today, whether you're working on kind of legacy systems, large enterprise kind of integrated systems, or kind of newer kind of greenfield systems, you're either been feeling it for a very long time, or you're starting to feel a kind of a weight, a burden of maintenance, or a cognitive load of trying to understand the system as it's changing. And that's a real challenge for many teams and many approaches towards testing. All right. Effective static documentation, for example, or the way that we traditionally go about creating test cases within test management tools, they really don't help face into many of these challenges. And actually, we think AI is a great advocate or assistant in terms of facing into many of these challenges. All right. So I've touched on kind of our kind of bread and butter of test design. We've kind of flirted slightly with AI in terms of, that there is something to come in terms of what we're talking about today on this webinar. I'm just going to flip it over to Don very quickly, just to run through the poll that we've been running since the start of this webinar, just to get everybody who's joined since we started to both complete the answers, but also have a slight conversation about what we are seeing from some of the audience that we've got here today. So over to you, Tom, very quickly.
Yeah, thanks, Rich. So we've kept the poll open and running, and really what we're trying to do here is understand a little bit more about where you are at your organisation, tailor the discussion today. So we've asked you to describe what applies to your organisation. The results have been quite interesting. So the majority of you have said your organisation is actively exploring AI solutions. That's potentially not surprising. Only about a third have said actually your organisation has begun implementing solutions for development and quality that use AI, and fewer than that, about 1 in 5 of you have said you're using AI in your day-to-day work. 15% of you have flagged the challenge that your teams and organisations have difficulty acquiring up-to-date information and knowledge about your systems. So what I'll do is I'll end the interaction now. You should all be able to see those results. But I guess, Rich and George, how does that align with sort of your expectations of what you see out there in the industry?
From my point of view, I think certainly the AI kind of response is aligned to what we see in terms of kind of everybody is interested in it, right? But actually, there are some real barriers to actually getting it working in individual organizations, right? And I think that's consistent with how people are answering. The bottom one around kind of organizational knowledge and kind of acquiring up-to-date information about how systems work, that's very different than what we hear people speak to, all right? And so my pessimism is that people haven't filled it in correctly.
Fair enough. How about you, George? What do you think of the poll you can see there in the interactions tab?
Yeah, I mean, no surprises for me in terms of, I think a lot of people are now either have already started implementing AI solutions or they are working on it. So, I'm using AI in my day-to-day work. I know most people at Curiosity are as well. So yeah, kind of not unexpected, the answer.
Yeah. Cool, fantastic. Well, perhaps, Rich, maybe as we speak more about that bottom line today, some of it might sound familiar, and that number might actually increase in today's webinar. But thank you everyone for voting in the poll. And
yeah, thanks very much, everyone.
Over to you, Rich.
Cool. Right. So carrying on with the slide. So when we talk about AI, I think it's key to kind of differentiate between what we're talking about. All right. So within Curiosity, really we've got kind of 2 strands of AI that we will kind of understand and build solutions against. All right. The first one is discriminative AI, which is on the right-hand side there, and that's really talking about patterns, mainly around data. And then we talk about generative AI, all right, and that's some of the stuff that we will concentrate on today. What's the differentiation between the two? If you think about discriminative AI, that's really around here's a load of pictures of cats, for example. Tell me whether it's a picture of a dog and a cat, right, and put them into pots of dogs and cats, right? That's really kind of what discriminative AI is. Lots of open source kind of ML algorithms around this kind of stuff. It's a real kind of quick, easy way to get into kind of the world of AI. Generative AI, really, we're talking about the world of LLMs. What you see around ChatGPT, for example. Really, if kind of discriminative AI was kind of sort these things into dogs and cats, actually generative AI is draw me a picture of a cat, for example, right? It generates something. In terms of use cases, we've got use cases in both. You can read the ones for yourself on the right-hand side. We've got a data capability, a test data capability that leans a lot around understanding data patterns, data flows, a lot around the discriminative AI side of things. But what we're going to concentrate today is a lot of the generative AI stuff. So in our world, for example, of model-based testing, if I put in a prompt around a certain business process, for example, I can create a visual model around that prompt that I put in, all right? Or I want to create a set of test cases based on my model. Again, we have generative AI capabilities that can do these kind of things. Or what we will concentrate on more today is around how you can use generative AI as a co-pilot or a fourth amigo, if you like, around the test design or systems understanding use case when you're developing systems. All right, so I've touched on kind of test design and kind of really the bread and butter of kind of where our solutions sit around assisted AI. This diagram, I'm sure everybody was familiar with the kind of DevOps infinity loop, and really we're talking about a couple of use cases that we developed around generative AI and modeling. All right, so the first one you see here is around collaborative models. So I've already touched on the fact that actually we can generate models from prompts. Although we're not going to touch on that kind of fundamental piece today, we're going to build on that in terms of the demos. There is lots of articles and webinars and video demonstrations that we'll share with you at the end, where if you're interested in seeing those fundamental things, you can go and watch them at your own leisure. And you see how kind of easy it is to kind of get started around creating models from simple prompts. All right. Caveat: AI is not a silver bullet, as I'm sure we all know. You know, I think we're over the kind of the marketing euphoria of the testing, kind of AI is going to replace all testers. Actually, we're in the world of how AI can assist and how we can best use AI and AI prompts to build out really rich understanding of models and systems and testing to make our world of testing a hell of a lot better than we're working with today. All right. Moving around then, so we've talked about models to building models from scratch or building models from prompts. Then we're into developing more richer models through interacting with AI. Okay, so a big part of what we talk about when we're doing model-based testing is the collaboration, you know, following a BDD style development model where you get together with your development product owner and the fourth amigo of AI to build out models and really ask critical questions about how a system should work or how a business process should work. Actually, what we bring to the party, if you like, is a co-pilot or an expertise not within the team that can give a different lens to ask critical questions or enhance the model based on what the AI is telling you and also what you want to incorporate into a model or a test coverage capability after that stage. So really what we're driving home here is that the human is always in charge. It's assisted by the AI capability, but the AI capability is there to enhance and accelerate what a test team or a broader development team has an understanding of or a grasp of in terms of their understanding. Okay, lastly there, what we're talking about is generative AI in terms of augmenting testing. All right, so I'm sure we've all got problems around test cases or regression packs that just bloat over time, have lots of duplication in there. We struggle with coverage or to understand a coverage metric. We'll give false positives in terms of their outcomes. All right, so again, through model-based testing and through algorithms, we have the ability to refine and refactor test coverage very, very quickly to stop that test bloat, that inefficiency that gets built into the testing cycle through change and a lack of refactoring in most testing disciplines. All right, so there's just 3 use cases that we talk about when we're thinking about AI and how to implement AI within our testing lifecycle and within model-based testing. All right, one of the big things that underpins this is LLMs. All right, LLMs come with some challenges. All right, so I'm sure many of us has played with BT. On the face of it, brilliant. All right, we can ask it to go and make a cup of tea for a simple prompt, and it will go out and tell us how to make a cup of tea. We can ask it how to make different types of tea, and it will go and do those kind of things, right? But the big problem with that when it comes to testing and testing systems within organizations is that these LLMs know a lot about world knowledge, all right, but they don't know a lot about what your systems does or your business process does or your organizational context or your standards within your organization. All right, and so whilst on the face of it, these things are really, really useful, actually, when you bring it into a company context, the use cases become very limited. All right, if you can't overcome those challenges of enhancing what those LLMs know or what they understand. All right. The other challenge is, where does this information sit within your organization? All right, your organization is for very many years looked to protect that information. It's IP, right? It's commercially sensitive information, and therefore it doesn't want it going into the outside world. All right. And so back to the poll where everybody's looking at kind of AI capabilities. One of the big challenges that we see in organizations getting started is how to overcome that LLM challenge. All right. Lots of LLMs are public. We're starting to see the rise of private LLMs, which will then comes the challenge of how do you train up those LLMs. That will come, accelerate over the next kind of months and years, so that I'm sure everybody will have kind of private LLMs that we could all kind of enhance and build capability off the back of it. But at this point in time, public LLMs kind of where a lot of organizations are exploring at the moment. This is a big challenge in terms of how do you get that organizational context into those LLMs. The other problem, not just how do those LLMs get the data, but where that data sits within your organization, or rather how up to date that information is. All right, that's a big challenge that as testers, you've been facing for a very long time. Despite many people saying that they don't have challenges getting up to date information and knowledge today, time and time again, we speak to people that have got kind of architectural diagrams that are many years old, or static documentation that just doesn't reflect what the system does today. It's a big challenge in terms of understanding how systems work for testers today. Likewise, it will be a big challenge for teaching LLMs in the future in terms of how a system should work. And the big problem with that subsequently is, as your system changes, how do you keep that LLM up to date in terms of the system changes, so it can give you correct answers time and time again as that system evolves. All right, it's a big challenge, which causes or might cause the system to hallucinate, right? Which is where, AI cannot be a silver bullet. It's an assistant to kind of a human interaction, and the human is always in control or driving what the right answer should be. All right. And again, this is where we see very much the LLM or the AI is an assistant to accelerate or enhance what the human is able to understand or do through the testing process or the systems understanding process. Okay, so that's some problems with LLMs. We've talked about some of the kind of the longer term, people will have private LLMs, but in the interim, we're looking at kind of the, call it tactical, it's not necessarily tactical solutions to overcome some of the challenges that LLMs don't necessarily have the context of systems or processes or your organization to really be helpful. All right, potentially they do. All right, so really what we're looking here is how to give LLMs information about your organization whilst keeping that organizational information secure within the remit of your organization. So a term that some people might have heard before, but it's starting to become more predominant in terms of AI and kind of temporary training of LLMs is RAG, so retrieval augmented generation. All right, so by this, what we're talking about really is enhancing prompts with, for example, additional information that you might gather from documentation, for example. All right, so how can you embed systems information within a prompt that you send to an LLM to then give it extra context around how it should answer to a certain question? So standards, for example, or business process, for example. All right, one example that we've built, and again, you can see a video subsequent to this session if you're interested, around how we bring Jira tickets or use cases from Jira into a prompt to build out a model, a visual model about how a certain business process should work. All right, so again, that's an example of retrieval augmented generation, where it overcomes the fact that your LLM doesn't have context of the organization. All right, one of the ways we've started to enhance that now, and this is really kind of doubling down on the fact that we've evolved our capabilities over time, is multi-shot prompting. All right, so what we find is that actually if we prompt our LLM or our generative AI for the first time, actually what we get isn't necessarily a particularly good response. All right, so actually what we found is that actually if we break these things down and we deliver multiple prompts that we can chain together into a visual model, we've got much more chance of getting a really improved response from the AI generated capability into a visual model that represents far more detail around what we're actually after as a response from the AI. Now, if you think about it kind of from a human context, we do things in a very similar way, right? If we've got a kind of a challenge, the best way that we kind of face into that challenge is to break it down into smaller parts, and then we tackle each part of that in smaller parts, and then we piece it all together at the end, right? So we're going from kind of a top-down problem, break it up into smaller chunks, to then piece that back together into a holistic solution at the end, all right? And we found that over time, that provides us a much better way of using AI to get a much richer response, augmenting, again, the human interaction, a much richer response working with AI to accelerate the testing process, get a better articulation or a model of how a system should work. Another example of that would be breaking down kind of a requirements document in Word, for example. Again, very similar to the kind of the Jira example, breaking that down using multi-shot prompting to feed that into the generative AI capability that we've got through modeling. That then gives us a kind of a plan that we can then review, and then we can take the pieces we want from the generative AI responses, and we can discard the bits that we don't want, right? The problem with AI is that some things are brilliant and they're right on target to what we want. Some things, not quite so much, right? And we have the ability to then look at the responses, take the bits that we find useful. In those 3 amigos conversations, we can have a conversation about how it's responding, and then take the bits we want, discard the bits we don't want, right? So again, it's the 4th amigo, in the same way that you would have conversations with your developer, your product owner, colleagues. Some inputs would be valid and therefore taken on board, some not so much. And it's the same kind of concept, right? And that actually we're just adding a 4th virtual conversation to this loop. You'll see some of that through the demos, so coming up. All right. The other more recent kind of addition to our AI is the addition of co-pilots. All right, so we've talked about kind of multi-shot kind of prompting. So how do you break out kind of requirement documents and kind of pick the bits you want? What we're doing here is we're really taking advantage of the industry knowledge that sits within those LLMs to give different or wider personas that might not necessarily be available to the immediate team that we're working with today. All right. So really, in the same way that LLMs have got a problem that it doesn't have your whole company context, one of the advantages it does have that it has a lot of context about best practices of the industries. All right. So, for example, security requirements, for example, there's a lot of requirements out in the industry about what good security requirements look like, or accessibility is another good example of that. All right. Infrastructure standards, again, another good example of industry guidance around what good looks like, that a lot of the time that skill and availability just isn't available in individual teams. All right. We call that IntelliAgents. All right. And again, you'll see this in the examples that we'll show you in a bit. You build out your model, and then you have the ability to use prompts to ask different questions from the perspective of these different personas, and then again get a build plan around these are the suggestions that we're recommending you add to this business process or this kind of model that you've built out. Which bits do you want to take on board, and actually which bits you want to discard? And as you pick those things and add them to your model, it will enhance the model, and therefore you'll get a much richer, more rounded articulation of requirements from different persona bases than you would have traditionally got through the skills and capabilities and experience of the individual team. So you can see there for yourselves the different personas that we're starting to build out, as well as the personas we've built out. You could build out your own personas. There's a lot of testing heuristics out there, again, that you could build into personas that, again, you could use as a good AI guided assistant to provide you context or guidance around how you should enhance your model based on those certain heuristics. All right. So it gives you a hell of a lot of structure to feed into your AI around how you want guidance to what you're actually building or understanding your system to do. All right. So that's a little guide through kind of some of the AI capabilities we've got, a bit of kind of understanding context around some of the challenges of LLMs that we've experienced, but some of the context or challenges around LLMs that no doubt you have experienced or you will experience in the future, and possibly some of the use cases that might be useful to you that we've started to incorporate within what we're doing with the model-based testing. But again, some of the use cases that you might experience through kind of your generic or test case design, or some of the different ways that you're starting to design your tests as well. With that, it's time to actually see some of the things I've just been talking about. All right, so I will hand over to George if I can figure out how to stop sharing. There we go. Over to you, George.
Great, thanks, Rich.
See ya.
See my screen?
Yep.
Cool. Okay, so I guess where I'm going to start is sort of running through a couple of different applications for AI when we think about how we are designing our models and therefore designing our tests. So the place that I want to start is kind of using text-based and text-based requirements to build these models. So what I've got on screen here is essentially it's a little model importer. What I've done is I've entered a prompt, which is all around a car rental service. So, you know, the standard features in here where you enter pickup.
Sorry, George. We can actually only see a blank screen at the moment. Would you mind? It might not be for everybody, but I think Mantas, I can only see a blank screen. Do you want to stop and maybe try reshare your screen?
Yeah.
So I thought I'd interrupt before you get too far along there.
No,
Perfect. Now I can see your desktop there.
You can see?
Yeah,
Cool.
That's coming through now. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. So yeah, I basically just entered a prompt here, which is all around a car rental service. So we're asking it to enter pickup, return dates, available cars, and sort of issue a booking confirmation. Now, what the AI does, it's going to come away and it's going to build the first attempt at this model. So inside our model here, it's pretty simple, really, where, you know, we're sort of beginning the process. We have a couple of decisions in here where we could either find no cars available and then sort of have an endpoint, or, you know, if there are cars available, then we come through and then we move further down the workflow in terms of entering driver details, payments, and working out if that payment has been successful. Now, that's all well and good. It's a starting point. And now, as Rich is saying, we need to be able to help refine what the AI is doing. So the next prompt I've added in here is basically just saying, okay, well, if there's a particular car type I'm using, we need to apply either a surcharge or a discount. What that does is it takes that initial model. So again, you'll recognize these initial steps around the car availability, but then also there's a sort of new set of blocks in here that have been added that will give us a bit more detail around, you know, is the car a BMW, is the car a Tesla, and apply those discounts or surcharges as required. The pattern continues, right? So then I've added a third prompt, which is going to be something around the payment options. That model gives us something that looks like this, where we could either have, you know, a card payment or a cash payment, and then, you know, we either process it or we're paying cash at the booth. So what we're doing here is we're kind of iterating over those AI responses, keeping that human in the loop and helping us to build a much more accurate representation of the system that we're trying to test. Now, at this point, you know, I'm pretty happy with this model. We've covered a lot of the different equivalence classes, a lot of the different aspects that we would expect to see within a car rental process. It's at this point where I can come through and generate my test cases. So what this is going to do is it's going to look at all of those different possible scenarios that our AI has generated, and it's going to create a series of paths through the system. Now, as I flick through these, you'll see they're picking up lots of different scenarios, lots of different routes through the system.
Sorry, George. Sorry, it's me again. Your screen's, for me personally, it's not actually moving or changing. So I'm not sure if it's again worth just stopping the share, resharing, making sure the whole window is being shared. It's possibly an issue with Webinar Geek, so sorry for that.
Try again.
Okay, that's perfect. That's got it.
Yeah. So this is the model I've been talking about. I've now essentially created different paths through the model. Each one of these paths has its associated test steps that you would expect to see, where I'm entering different rental details, car selection, driver details, and card payments. Now, this is a good starting point. Where we've kind of taken AI to the next phase is beginning to actually think about different types of inputs for the AI. So the next thing I want to talk through is this document uploader. So I'm just checking that you can now see a different screen. Is that Tom?
Yeah, all good. All good. Thank you.
So what I have here is actually a Word document with lots of different requirements, and it's actually all around a web-based sales systems for a solar energy company. Now, inside this document, we've got lots of different sections, lots of different things around the scope of the project, the different users, how these users might utilize this application. So what I've done is I can come in and actually just upload this. And using the AI, it's going to go through and create a model plan. So what you'll see here on screen is we have all of the different all of the different models that the AI wants to create based off of what it's seeing inside of the Word document. So the first one, it's going to create a product catalog model. You'll see that we get the option to edit the name, edit the description, and you'll see as we flick through here, we've got lots of different models. User account, customer support, billing models, shipping models, etc., etc. Now, at this point, I can come in and ask the AI to then build those models based off of that plan that it's presented to us. So if I wanted to say not have any of these models or add additional models, that I could come in and say, well, no, as part of this plan, I don't really want to see these particular models. So you'll see here now we've clicked next. We've got a series of generated models. Each one of these is kind of a link out to a new model. So I'll just open up a couple of these. Each one of these models essentially being a different aspect or a different area of the system under test that has been identified by the AI just by basically looking at our requirement specification document. So if I come into models here, first one that we want to take a look at is the access control model. A second. Okay, so inside here, the AI has kind of looked at the document and built out this model based off of what it's seeing, right, from within the document. So you'll see there's lots of different journeys through here, lots of different dependencies, different start points, all of which are really describing what's going on inside of our system under test. Similarly here for our customer support model, we've got different user authentication journeys, different routing decisions, etc., etc. Now it's at this point we can start to actually use the AI to self-regulate and I guess build on what we've done. So in the top right hand corner here, I'm just going to select our Copilot screen. So this is where we can begin to bring AI into the loop based off of its initial attempt at building the model. So there's a few things that we can do in here. So this is where the agents come in that Rich was talking about. There's different agents in here related to accessibility, compliance. We can ask it, if there's things missing with our missing scenarios, if there's localization specifics that we want to include as well. So if I select, for example, identify missing scenarios, what this is going to do is it's going to tell the AI to go away using this model that it's built try and think of any missing scenarios that it might have missed as part of the initial generation process. So, that could be things related to negative test cases, or it could be things related to, loading times, and how the page is viewing in particular browsers or in particular operating systems. So on the right hand side here, we've now come in and it's offering us a few different scenarios that it thinks that we're missing. So for example, if I look at this top one here, it has identified that there might be a scenario missing where the directory information is either outdated or corrupted. There's things in here around authentications, feedback loops, region misidentifications. Now, me as a human, some of these I might know to be not valid or not relevant. For example, in this scenario, database connection, that's fine. I don't want to worry about that. However, I do know that, I want to cover any region misidentification scenarios. So if I select that option, that's going to ask the AI to evaluate this model and update it based off of any region misidentifications that may have occurred. You'll see then we can almost treat this as a checklist, going through, picking off all of these different ones, saying yes to some, saying no to some, and asking the AI to give its own feedback on itself. Now that'll take 30 seconds. So while that's going and doing that, I'm also then just going to show you the next step here, which is once we've done that process, the model or the sort of the larger end-to-end model will be created automatically for you. So as part of, I just did this just before we hopped on, but basically the next step in this place in this workflow is, okay, let's now build a model that represents the end-to-end workflow for the entire document. What this will do is it will pull together those individual pieces of the puzzle that it's created. So login, placing orders, billing processes, shipping processes, etc. And it will bring it together in a larger end-to-end master model. Now, this master model is designed to be kind of the high-level overview of your application. And actually, if I begin and expand some of these, we've actually collapsed a lot of the complexity that you would expect to see inside some of these workflows into these sort of individual blocks. So actually, all of these models, all of these subflows that you see here are being designed by the AI. And in most of our scenarios, we've come in and asked the AI to self-validate and self-improve. So hopping now back to the previous example with our region misidentification process, you see now the AI has come back and it said, okay, I've updated the model with 2 nodes. So if I come in here, it's added a couple of blocks here that will allow us to capture that missing scenario, right? Now, what I would do next is I would continue to apply, these agents, and so keep asking, okay, how can we improve? That uses both the AI's knowledge and also my personal SME knowledge. We could even switch to a slightly different context, where if we're thinking about, a security analyst or security tester, what kind of things would we expect a security test to look at, and do those things exist already inside of our model? So the end point really is then, if we hop back over to our end-to-end model, is a really quite complex process that has been driven by the AI creation process, but also refined by humans along the way. This then allows me, I can then hit generate, and that will go away and generate me a series of paths through our model that we saw previously. So that's just created a single path through there, and that then uses all of those component pieces of our puzzle to build a larger end-to-end test. Okay, so that kind of covers off what I was wanting to show on the demo there. Apologies if you missed the first kind of minute or so on my screen, but yeah, please do let us know any questions, and I'll hand back over to Tom.
Thanks for that, George. Yeah, apologies to you about the Webinar Geek platform there. Not entirely playing good ball, but I think we caught 95% of that. So thank you very much for that. So we'll go now into the Q&A. So if you've got any questions, please do get them in the chat box for George and for Rich. Just before doing that, I just wanted to cover off a few sort of next steps from today. So we're going to send you an email with the slides and with the recording, so please do look out for that. We'll also send you links if perhaps you wanted to book a meeting with us. We'd love to hear from you. Over the last year, we really have produced a lot of resources and research around AI, webinars, podcasts, roundtables, with lots of different people contributing. So we've packaged them up into an e-learning pack. If you want it, just let us know. There's a poll going on now in the interactions, so hit yes if you want to if you want to receive this information pack from us. There will also be a post-webinar survey where you can let us know that you want to receive this, and we'll share those resources with you. But with that said, we've had some questions coming as we've been going, so we'll go on to the live Q&A there. One question, which I think is a great question, asks, if I have a model that's already been built manually, can I use the Copilot to check for possible missing scenarios?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's kind of one of the things that we're really pushing now is, even if you are creating all of these models by hand, and you're relying on personal SME knowledge, at any point during the process, you can ask the AI to come in and evaluate what you're doing. Now, as Rich said, sometimes it might give you a really useful response, sometimes maybe not, but the idea is to accelerate you, right, and to give you more of a chance of being correct. So, that includes other kind of importers as well. So one of the other things that we do a lot of is, if you have, for example, a BPMN process, you can import that into Modeler and then use the AI to evaluate that existing BPMN process.
I think just to expand on that slightly, there becomes this kind of evolutionary thing, right? By which when you import from something else into a model, the model under the covers has a hell of a lot of structure in it, okay? And so that becomes very useful in terms of articulating the rules, if you like, to the LLM about how it should respond about the system. So our models in themselves hold a hell of a lot of structured information about how your system should work or how your process should work. So it kind of elevates the whole kind of understanding of the system into the AI as well.
Awesome, thank you for that. Thanks, George. Thanks for the question there. Another question that came in on the private chat has asked whether there's a language that's preferred to feed into the AI so that the model can be generated. So is there a preferred language here?
No, as long as the LLM that's being connected to can respond and understand that language, then the models will be built. For example, if you're sending prompts in Italian or uploading an Italian document, it will return you a model in Italian, right?
Yeah, I just to explain again, almost the language doesn't matter. It's just how thorough the articulation is. In that we've converted code to models as well. I think some of the more sparse requirements documents, it just have to be realistic, right? In terms of how is the AI going to interpret and come up with an exhaustive answer if it's not articulated anywhere? All right, and so you can still use it and it can still accelerate, but you might just need to do a bit of prompt work afterwards, just because the structure and the detail isn't there in the first place. AI is not a silver bullet.
No, it's not. Thanks for that. Thanks for the question. So I guess a more specific question here asks, as part of ETL testing, given the mapping document, source and target tables, columns, transformation, would it be possible to generate test cases of scenarios specific to that testing?
Absolutely, yeah. I guess at risk of giving the same answer but do a different context, ETL tests tend to have a hell of a lot of structure. All right. And in the same way, it's great if you've got those kind of things to import it into a model, or if you haven't got that detail already, to build that structure into a model as well. All right. And then, in the same way that I said your model becomes a great oracle to the AI later on, it's that kind of scenario that's playing out again, right? You've got a hell of a lot of structured information that you're able to interact with the AI with.
Yeah. And then so I was showing a little bit there about the planning process. And that would be very important for that. If you've got that mapping document, the AI is going to first ask you, if I build these models, are you happy with it? And that's a good starting point. And once you've got those models built, that's where you can hop in, use the co-pilot, and use that intelligence as a kind of back and forth between the human and the AI to build the best model possible.
Nice one, thanks for that. And this may be a question for you, George. Somebody's asked us, how are the tests executed on the system under test, and is it real-time execution?
Yeah, good question. So I didn't show anything really to do with test automation in the demo. What I was just showing was how we can generate manual test scenarios. Now, we can do a couple of things in terms of the automation. We can either use the AI to ask it to build some automation. That's something that we've been working on recently. Alternatively, you can overlay your own sort of object libraries and function libraries on top of these models to build your automation scripts. And then what's next, right? A lot of the time, what we're actually doing is we're connecting to an organization's grid network, i.e. somewhere where they already execute a series of tests. It might be linked to a build platform like Jenkins or through Git or something like that. But really what we're doing is we're very flexible. So if you have an existing grid setup, we will simply push the tests that we're generating in code to your automation framework repositories and go from there. Or we can have it sort of in-house, and we have kind of that real-time execution piece as well, where you can run a series of tests in parallel against a live system, and integrate that way and get the sort of results back into the model as well. Good question.
That's awesome. Thank you for that. And this actually, Rich, I think goes back to something you mentioned earlier around sort of the sharing of sensitive data. And so somebody's asked, we have company sensitive data. Would the information shared with the AI be secure?
It depends what AI you're using. Unfortunately, it's a bit of a cop-out answer from my perspective, right? So one of the big challenges of a lot of organizations that are standing up AI capabilities today is how to protect that information, right? We can interact with any LLM capability, be that either private or public, right? We're just pinging on to the API that it provides, all right? And so there are LLM capabilities that don't hold the prompt information, and in that case, clearly it won't be held. But in the more public kind of ChatGPTs, I believe they are. My unhelpful advice is always check the rules and regulations around what that LLM is doing. All right, but I think one of the big challenges that lots of organizations will be facing into at this very point in time is what LLMs are right for them, given the profile around how they want to protect their data. All right, and then our kind of capability sits on top of that, and it's a bit of a plug and play capability on the back of it. So although from our perspective, not a bit of a cop-out answer in terms of not being very helpful, it's really for the organization to understand which route they want to take in terms of LLM and how to train that LLM, how to protect it in terms of their own organization, etc., etc.
Nice one. So thanks for that there, Rich. I guess just perhaps we finish on this question, right? So I guess anybody who's ever sort of fed a calculation into an AI knows this produces a pretty questionable results, right? So how do we go about solving that problem with this approach?
It's a good question. So interestingly, you see a lot of the people who kind of test LLMs go down the calculation route. I think the interesting thing there is kind of understanding how LLMs are working, and the fact that it's more around predicting what the next word should be rather than kind of having any understanding around the subject it's talking to or the calculations it's trying to make, which is why inevitably you will get hallucinations. All right. For us, and again, we've touched on, as long as you've got oracles that have got a hell of a lot of structure to it, and you're asking qualitative questions to it, through models or through, if models is the oracle that you're feeding to it, you're more than likely going to get a more robust answer. All right. And again, it comes back to the fact that we're not relying on the AI to be the silver bullet to us. Actually, what we're asking for is a response that we will then go back and understand whether it's given us the right response or not, or a reflection of responses based on the information we input into it, but also the response it gave us. If it gave us a good response, then we know that and we can incorporate that into what we're doing, i.e. our model, and it accelerates what we're doing, it enhances what we're doing. But actually, we're not trying to replace what we're doing, right? We're always kind of in control of what we're trying to do. And sometimes we recognize that actually we're going to get some hallucinations because unfortunately, AI isn't always going to be predictable.
Always important to keep that human in the loop. What we don't want people to start doing is just to, chuck a load of prompts at an AI and then take the word as gospel. That that's the right answer, right? There needs to be that process where the SME sits there and is accelerated by the AI, but they don't necessarily just trust absolutely everything.
I think, to misquote kind of Mark Winteringham, who's kind of wrote the AI-assisted testing book quite recently, I think enhance or advocate for AI, but have a healthy cynicism around it, I think is kind of, it's a good take.
Absolutely. I said last question, but actually the questions have carried on coming in and we've got some good ones. So thank you everybody for the questions. It was a great discussion. So one question that came in is asked, how are the generated models aligned with agile methodology, including frequent changes in the requirements and features?
So I think this one sort of speaks more to modeling as a whole and why kind of model-based testing is really, really useful for becoming more agile in your workflows. What the AI is doing is just speeding up and enhancing that model building process and just making it better. I guess the reason why we're modeling is that a model in itself is a much clearer representation of the system under test than a requirements document or a list of tests in Excel. And it's also very, very reactive. It's essentially living documentation as well. And kind of one of the things that we see a lot of is actually cross-functional teams using these models. So not just it being isolated to testers, but actually the developers, the business analysts, testers, the product managers, they're all kind of looking at this and working from this model. At the same time. I know, Rich, if you have any additional thoughts on that.
I guess some of it also feeds into an approach, right? Just because if you're doing modeling, that doesn't necessarily mean you're waterfall or agile, or if you're using Gherkin, again, the same way that you could use Gherkin in a waterfall context. It really comes down to approach and isolation. You can implement the test pyramid in the same way that you can implement it through any other tools through modeling as well, right? George showed a process flow or a business process flow, I think, but you can implement APIs as well through modeling. If you're interested in how to apply model-based testing techniques within a kind of an agile context or a continuous testing context, I should say, we did a test guild video that I'm sure we can kind of send to people or add it to the comments or something like that kind of explains how to create isolation, how to implement the test pyramid, how to refactor tests, very, very quickly than you would do in any other technique, how to implement automation, all of those things you can do in an agile context. Go and watch the video.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think this question is really a follow-up and we'll probably build on that answer there and some of the stuff you discussed. Somebody's just followed up to ask how in sprint stories are tested. So I suppose, in sprint requirements change requests.
Exactly as we just said, just to expand on my question or the answer slightly. Agile is iterative delivery, right? And therefore you're building on something, right? And it really feeds into how do you understand the impact of change? How do you understand the ripple effect in terms of the broader system? Traditional methods, test cases, even Gherkin, they don't help you in doing that, all right? But yet model-based techniques allow you to make an amendment to the model. We didn't go through this today, but again, you can see these things in other videos. They allow you to amend the model and understand the impact of change instantly, all right? And then generate your test cases, your automation, instantly again, but again, not just generating them instantly, but you're removing all of the duplication, the redundant tests that you've now introduced through changing the system. You're removing all of those things because you've got a kind of a digital twin, i.e. a model of how your system is going to work in the future, right? And that, that's the power of model-based testing with something like a Three Amigos collaborative BDD approach at the very start of your kind of your agile sprints. Go and watch the video.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. We'll share that video. We've had another really good question actually, which is somebody's asked whether the generated model comes with all the possible data combinations that could be tested, or whether data needs to be built separately and fed into the model.
So I think there's two parts to that question. Does it come with all of the combinations possible? No, that's a bit like it can do, but it might not, right? When there's enough is enough is essentially kind of the answer, right? In terms of, this is why we're saying AI and modeling can be a great accelerator to get you to where you want to go, to a position, all right? But actually, is it enough? That's a collective conversation in your Three Amigos or your product owner to say, look, these are the scenarios, this is what the model does. Have we missed anything? Yes, I can go to my AI Copilot and ask it for anything else, and it can give me suggestions, but it can also give me analysis paralysis, all right? You saw lots of things through George's examples that you might not be interested in, right? And there's a flip side of AI being accelerator. Actually, it can give you too much, right? And so that's a human conversation about how much is enough, what's good enough in terms of coverage or testing, or how the system should work, all right? The second part to that question is, can you implement the data within the model? Yes, you can, right? You can parameterize up each of the business rules or the data combinations within the model. And as the model changes, again, all of those things can be refactored into the data. If the data is not exhaustive, sorry, if it has an age, i.e. it runs out, or you need to refresh the data, we've got a really powerful data engine underneath it that can make sure that the data is refreshed based on the business rules, so you don't get kind of the static, stagnant, I should say, data problems that, again, is inherent in a lot of test approaches today.
Fantastic.
Yep, spot on. I was going to say basically the same thing. Rich.
Excellent. Well, we're coming up to the end of the hour there. I mean, thank you everybody for those questions through the Q&A. I feel that was a really lively discussion. So thanks for making it as interactive as it can be. I think really all that remains to be said then is also thank you, George, thank you, Rich, for the interesting and engaging presentation. And thank you to everybody who's joined and made today's webinar possible. So yeah, thanks to all of you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks a lot.
Okay. Cheers, Al.